Okay, so I was asked to say something about Christian witchcraft. This one is kind of difficult, but we're going to try and get through it. But first, let's do the intro. Welcome to my channel. You are entering the world of magic and mysticism with your host, Lee W. Johnson. Keep the lights on and help improve the channel by becoming a supporter for just $2.99 per month. Hit the join button. Okay, Christian witchcraft. There's actually so much to unpack with this, and so much to analyze and sift through that. Oh, I don't know. I actually started writing a blog post about this, as I've been doing lately, and so much to get through. But I'm going to try and break it down into small little bits and bites that we can kind of figure it out. Can you have such a thing as a Christian witch? I don't think so, and hopefully my examination and explanation will show you why. However, can you have a Christian magician? Absolutely, I believe you can. Can you have somebody who follows folk magic? Absolutely, they did in the past. In fact, you'll find a lot of the older books had charms that mentioned God, mentioned Jesus Christ. So there's a lot of folk magic that comes out of certain areas, I'm thinking mostly Europe, that were very Christian based. Were they witches? No, they wouldn't have called themselves witches. We do have ceremonial magic, which brings a lot of Christian influence into it, combined with Kabbalah and such things, but they don't call themselves Christian. They don't call themselves witches. We have hoodoo, and hoodoo pulls in the saints and the Bible. Are they Christian or are they witch? Are they both? Don't call themselves that. It's conjure doctor or root worker. So we do have a lot of traditions and paths throughout the world and throughout history which have incorporated a lot of Christianity. Quite often it has been to survive. In order to survive, especially with things like hoodoo, which was brought across to America with the slaves from West Africa, in order to survive they had to incorporate Catholicism and the Christian faith into their practice and hide everything within that. So in many instances it was a survival mechanism. But over ages, throughout generations, those practices, especially in regards to folk magic, became more prominent, and people who were brought up in families where folk magic was used would have probably been Christian, but they would not have been a Christian witch. Can we bring that terminology into our modern day? Well, let's have a look. First of all, the most glaring and apparent difficulty here is the worldview. And the most glaring and apparent part of that worldview is that Christianity is monotheistic and witchcraft is polytheistic. You can't marry the two. The one says that there is only one God, and you shall not have any other God before me. The other one follows many, many gods. In some instances it doesn't. In some instances some people do not have any following of any deity, they just practice magic, i.e. folk magic, etc., etc. But in the case of monotheism versus polytheism, the one is just one God and no other gods. You're not allowed, it is forbidden to have any other gods before that one God, whereas the other one has many, many gods. So how do you bring those two together? Now, just to give you some background, I'm not completely ignorant when it comes to Christianity. In my later teen years, I went through various experiences. The one was being filled by the Holy Spirit, and in that instance it wasn't a case of, somebody coming along and praying for me and pushing my forehead so I fell down. It was the evangelist that was doing this was definitely connected, and the experience was extremely real. And I was kind of at that stage in my teen years of rebellion that I didn't believe any of this shit, but something caused me to stand up and say it's me, and he came over. Two people stood on either side of me to catch me. He put his fingers on my forehead, said something, and then I was just filled with absolute and utter peace, and I couldn't stand. My entire body just became jelly, and I fell, and they caught me, they laid me down on the ground, and I don't know how long I was there, but it was incredible. It was really incredible. Those things are real. They're not just complete rubbish. There are some out there who will, push you over type of thing, and people think that they have been filled with the Holy Spirit, but in this instance, it was an absolute real experience. I then went on to teach. I taught the youth at my Methodist church, and I was planning on going to Bible school and becoming a Methodist minister. I had two callings, one to demonology and one to healing, which you might find quite interesting because I continued those paths in a different direction. But there was some huge problems that arose and forced me out of the church, and I continued to follow my own path, which then went down the path of witchcraft, into magic, shamanism, left-hand path, Satanism, demonology. I needed to discover it all as much as I possibly could. And so anyway, just a bit of background, just to say I am not completely ignorant when it comes to Christianity, but I have seen the problems and the difficulties, but at the same time I've also seen the magnificence and the splendor of it. This is why I don't particularly like using the term Christian or Christianity. Actually, I would rather call it churchianity or Paulianity, because the teachings of Christ were sound, they were solid, they were there. I consider Jesus Christ to be the same or similar to Buddha. Buddha came along and created a middle way. Christ just came along and tried to find a way which was probably at his time more modern, a different way of seeing things, a different way of viewing things, and try to create a path that everybody could follow. Unfortunately, some people came along, militarized everything, and we then got modern Christianity. But even over those centuries, from the first century when Catholicism came about, which is said to be the continuation of the work of the apostles, the incorporation throughout Europe and stuff, we find that there was a lot of overlap between paganism and Christianity, because it wasn't just, we talk about the Crusades and things like that, and at some point, yes, there were wars, there were religious wars, and there was forcing the hand of the people and things like that. But it wasn't the case all the time. There was incorporation. The king would convert to Christianity, and because the king of that area converted, therefore all the people under that king would be expected to convert as well. But in some cases it wasn't war and forced hands and things like that. But in order to incorporate those things, some paganism and folk magic had to be incorporated into the Christian faith and vice versa. So there was a melding that happened. And so a lot of people, pagan people who did folk magic, incorporated the spirits from Christianity into their magic itself. But as I said, this isn't witchcraft. When we look at witchcraft, we are specifically looking at a polytheistic path, and that incorporates many gods, whereas Christianity is monotheistic and there is only one God. There is only allowed to be one God. Now, I picked up some books just randomly to try and find out what people are actually incorporating into their practices of Christian witchcraft. So there were two short ones: The Basics of Christian Witchcraft by Charles Angel and The Christian Witch by Albertus Crowley. Now, these two I thought were absolute trash. In fact, I thought I was reading Christian propaganda, because it comes across in such a way that, yes, we have specific meditations, we can do specific visualizations, bringing the light of Jesus down into you and things like that. And they even spoke about spell work. But it almost felt like somebody was saying, it's okay that you're practicing this, as long as you follow the word of Jesus and you supplicate yourself to God. And so instead of trying to forcibly bring people back to the flock, they're kind of like, easing in there and saying it's okay, but you're still Christian. So I don't know, it just felt really, really bad. But the one interesting thing, or a few interesting things I did find about these two books was that, firstly, in the beginning, especially, which one was it? I think it was The Basics of Christian Witchcraft. What was interesting, at the beginning it mentions witchcraft, and then right through the book there's no mention of witchcraft or witch. It's magic. You are doing magic. The spell work you're doing is magic. The visualization you're doing is magic. And that's not witchcraft. Magic is found in ceremonial magic. It's found in Kabbalah. It's found in all of the paths, in folk magic, but it's not witchcraft. Okay. The other interesting thing I found, and this is a quote from, which one was it? The Christian Witch. I think this will speak volumes. As a Christian witch, you ought to realize the truth that you have no power of your own, and all powers and graces that are given to you by God, you also surrender to God at the same time. So, tell a witch that they have no power of their own. It all belongs to their god or their goddess, and I think you'll probably get the evil eye. But I mean, that alone is just, I don't know, it just speaks volumes. The other one, however, it's a book by Adelina St. Clair called The Path of a Christian Witch. It was a bit more mature. She has examined her own faith, her own path, and has tried to combine Christianity, or actually Catholicism in this case, not the modern, the separation that happened between the Catholicism Protestant into the Methodist church and such things. So it was Catholicism, and then she examined witchcraft. However, that witchcraft she speaks about is very much neo-paganism, neo-Wicca. And there was a story in there where she was in a group of people who were learning witchcraft, and the one week it was to pick your god and goddess. So very eclectic, because this teaching was pick any pantheon you want and pick your god and goddess type of thing. And she said she came to realize that her god and goddess are Jesus of Nazareth and Mary of Magdalene. Now, just that statement alone removes, in my mind, my interpretation, just remember this is all my personal thought, removes her from Christianity, because you may have no other God before me. Really, that simple. That's the law that was put down. It's not allowed. So to call another spirit a God removes the Christianity from the whole scenario. So we have the monotheism, we have the polytheism, which is the glaring apparent difference, and we cannot marry the two. We then have animism. We can bring animism into this, and in regards to animism, because witches are usually animistic, they believe that there is a spirit in all things: stones, trees, plants, birds, fish, humans, everything. Okay, everything has a spirit, has a soul. When it comes to Christianity, there are a lot of schools of thought that don't go into this. Not even your pet dog has a spirit or a soul and will not go to heaven. Now, in this regard, what we can do is have a look at the texts from the Nag Hammadi library, specifically I think it was called the Book of Thomas. It was written by Thomas. There is a part in there which are said to be the words of Jesus himself, and it speaks about different animals, birds, and such, making it to heaven. So there is an animistic quality in there, and the Hebrew faith, Judaism, is very, if you have a look into the magic of it, the Kabbalah, and also the shamanic side of the older Jewish faith, it is very animistic. I mean, Judaism itself wasn't originally monotheistic anyway. It came from a polytheistic root. So, there's also that to consider. But again, if we start looking into the roots of Judaism, which was extended into Catholicism, because Christ was a Jew, and then extended into more modern Christianity, even if you take yourself all the way back to that shamanic root, are you still a Christian? In modern interpretations, no, you wouldn't be, because you're following a polytheistic path. So, I don't think, as soon as you say Christian witch, they clash too much. I mean, even, maybe I'm taking this too far, but where are you going to go when you die? Have you even thought about that? If you believe you're going to heaven, then you're a Christian. Witches don't believe in heaven and hell. There is no part in it. But if you believe you're going to the underworld to your ancestors, or you believe you're going to enter back into the cosmic soup, then you're not a Christian. So where's the in-between? There is no in-between, and that's the difficulty, that's the problem. When it comes to monotheism versus polytheism, you could bring in pantheism, and although pantheism is considered more to be a theology or a philosophy rather than an actual theism, although it has theism on the end of it, but that is, the difficulty there is there's a few interpretations of what that actually is, but one of them is that you have a power, a force, a body, which is everything. And what makes up that everything are various spirits, various gods, various goddesses. You can even bring it into animism and say that the soul of the rocks and the trees and the birds and the fish and the humans and the animals, the beasts, all of those souls make up this big body, kind of like your own body, which has millions and millions of cells, and those cells make up your big body. And these cells all work together in order to keep the body operational and functioning and everything else. So very similar to that. So you could then bring the interpretation that we have all these gods and goddesses which make up this big body, and you are pantheistic. But then again, you're kind of pushing out of the Christian worldview quite a bit, actually. So again, it is difficult because we have to try and interpret what Christianity actually is, and even witchcraft. Witchcraft has become quite an umbrella term. About 20 years ago, it used to be paganism. Still is paganism, but witchcraft has become that big umbrella term. You know, if you practice magic, you are a witch. Might not necessarily be a witch, but even to the extent of if all you do is make herbal teas, you're a witch. But you're not. Now, if you make herbal teas, you're a herbalist. If you read tarot cards, you're a diviner. It doesn't mean you're a witch. There's a lot more to it than just doing a particular practice. There's an entire worldview that gets incorporated into this, and if you don't follow that worldview, you are not that thing. If you do not follow the worldview of a polytheistic worldview of a witch, then you're not a witch. If you do not follow the monotheistic worldview of a Christian, then you're not a Christian. And if you try to follow both, you can't, because they are two completely separate roads. So I think you see what I hope you see what I'm trying to get at here. There are paths that do incorporate Christianity into a magical practice, but they're not witchcraft. That's a completely different worldview. Well, not completely different, but it's a different worldview to that Christian worldview. And, you know, even those paths, they usually incorporate the saints and Mary, Mary of Magdalene and Mary the Mother. They'll incorporate such archetypes as John the Baptist, as Thomas. Some may even incorporate Pontius Pilate, you know, as the adversary. But when we're looking at that, then that's, again, we've then got to come back to Catholicism versus Protestantism, and that separation that happened into, you know, when we talk about Christianity, I kind of think more along the lines of the Methodists and the Baptists and Adventists and the all of these modern churches that we have, which are not Catholic. But Catholicism was the extension of the apostles that followed Christ, and the continuation of their work, and it became a whole thing. And you know, over 2,000 years, things develop, they change, they grow, they become something which they weren't originally. That's to be expected. It's happened in witchcraft. But one of the difficult things is when it comes to witchcraft itself, which was starting to get into earlier and then went off on a tangent. There's this saying that, well, there is a saying that all Wiccans are witches, but not all witches are Wiccans. because Wicca is a religious practice and witchcraft is a magical practice. To some extent it's true, but that seems to have become extended into the idea that if you are practicing magic, you're just immediately a witch. But your practice may not incorporate the worldviews of a witch. Hope that makes sense. So you really need to examine the worldview itself. Have a look at the heathen worldview, the Celtic worldview, and they're very different. And when you do that, you'll probably find that they wouldn't call themselves witches either. There's been some debate in my own life about whether I should continue calling myself a witch, because it's been so misinterpreted, not by the Christians, but by the pagan communities. It's become something which it actually isn't anymore. So it's kind of difficult, because on the one hand, if we do look at the actual worldview of a witch, we cannot be a Christian witch. On the other hand, if we do look at the idea that witches become in our modern time, then it could be possible. If we extend it into chaos magic, you can take all of the archetypes, the saints, and the spirits, Christ, Mary's, all of it, and put it into or construct it into a mythology that you can use in circle casting, in magic working. But again, is a chaos magician a witch, or is it a chaos magician a chaot, or a chaos mage, or a chaos magician? I wouldn't call a chaos magician a witch, unless they're practicing witchcraft at the time. And this is the thing with chaos magic, you completely consume yourself with one path, one religion, one ideology, one worldview. You completely immerse yourself in that, and you become that in order to do a specific work. And then when that work's done, you release it. You become free of belief, completely free of belief. And then you take on another ideology, another worldview, in order to complete a different working. So it's not about taking bits out of here and taking bits out of there until you understand both. Until you really have completely consumed yourself within both worldviews and understand them explicitly, then you can start taking things out which overlap, which have bridges, which have a similarity, and they may be called two different things, but they're explaining the same thing. So you can take those two and put them together because they already are the same thing. But then you can start combining things, but you have to completely and utterly understand both worldviews, and you have to have completely immersed yourself in them in order to combine them. So when it comes to Christianity and witchcraft, you may have immersed yourself in Christianity, you may have immersed yourself in witchcraft separately, not together, but separately, because you have to understand those both worldviews separately before you can bring them together. Once you've done that, you'll find that they do not come together. They cannot come together. They are just too diverse to bring together. And you may try and even bring this into the idea of the three worlds, upper world, middle world, and lower world, or underworld, and say that they are heaven, earth, and hell, but they're not. The Christian hell is a place where the evil go, where sinners go, where murderers and rapists and child molesters go when they die. The underworld in witchcraft is not that, just isn't that. In fact, most of the underworld is what Christians would call heaven. So you can't even marry those two world trees, we can call the Christian idea of worldview. There's just too much that needs to be properly examined, not just on a surface level. You need to properly examine all of these things within each worldview, and you can try and smash a round peg into a square hole, and if it's made of wood, you probably could smash it in, but you're forcing it. It's not going to stay there, and you're going to probably have some problems later on. But anyway, so that's my understanding, my interpretation, my thoughts on the matter. I do understand why people want to be Christian witches, but just examine the worldviews and examine the words themselves. Do you have to be a Christian witch? Why do you have to be a Christian witch? Why can you not be a Christian magician? Is it really that bad to call yourself something different rather than calling yourself a Christian witch? What's your reason for trying to force those two worldviews together? I don't know, has witch just gotten this name now that everybody wants to be a witch? And I think a lot of people do, because it's cool, it's edgy also. So it brings that edginess into it, because now everybody's a freaking witch. But it's kind of taken the word and it's taken it out of context, completely out of context. So anyway, alright. So that's me for today, rambling on. And I'm sure I'm going to get lots of hate mail for this one. That's okay. Alright, I'll see you on Wednesday for Ask Lee. Have a good one for now. Cheers, bye.